Hello, this is Dario Marjoli, and this is a review of the book Self-Therapy by Jay Earley, who is a doctor. And this book has been recommended as an alternative to the more famous book, No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. The reason some recommended this book was that No Bad Parts explains the concept of internal family systems, but I guess this book sort of promises, based on the title, self-therapy, that you can apply it to yourself and actually do it yourself. That's what it promises, but you will see from my review that the reality is something else. Let's review some of the things this book says. For example, a person may be triggered by a situation at work. This activates an overeater aspect of this person, so that he doesn't feel the fear of losing their job. So overeater is a protective part. Procrastinators may have an aspect of them that keeps them busy all the time, avoiding them doing the main thing because the main thing causes them some stress. So that's another example of a part. So this book talks a lot about protective parts. The busy aspect of him is trying to protect the embarrassed child from feeling the pain of shame. A third aspect or part criticizes him when he doesn't get the main tasks he is avoiding. So we see there are many parts. There's this the part that keeps you busy, but then there's this part that criticizes you for not getting the main thing done, and then there's that inner child that was hurt. Any aspect of you that acts out can be a protector part. Any aspect of you that makes you cope in unhealthy ways is a protector part. They distort reality since they protect you when it's no longer necessary. These protector mechanisms, they started when you were a child, so they continue now, even though they might not be necessary. So that's why they make you do odd things. Protectors don't realize that you're not a child in danger anymore. The book talks about the self, which in other philosophies is the consciousness, the pure self, the pure being, which is when you have compassion and you can contemplate with some distance with yourself, with your consciousness, you can make your wounded inner child who needed love feel loved, and you can reparent them. But you have to do it from that part that feels confident, that consciousness part of you that feels confident, that feels happy, feels strong. It calls it self. Their internal family systems nomenclature. It explains the inner wounded child. As a child who experienced terrifying abuse and had no one to turn to for support and understanding, the incident couldn't be processed. Why? Because to process a traumatic incident, you need to talk with people, talk it out. But when you were a child, you couldn't do that. So the incident couldn't be processed, and the part was frozen at that point in time. So that's how parts come, which in this case, wounded inner child, their language, IFS, internal family system, it calls it exiles. So the exiles are young parts in a way, because they got frozen in time when you were 5 years old, 6 years old. If you had long-term neglect as a child, as an adult you feel needy all the time and unloved. If you felt worthless as a child because whatever you did wasn't grabbing the attention and the care of your parents, then as an adult, your protectors act out by getting furious and angry easily. The book has some suggestions. Make your wounded inner child aware of you. Stay with the feeling. Don't expect the inner child to deliver a story. Develop a relationship with the wounded inner child. Ask questions to your wounded inner child. My opinion is that this is an extremely long book. 400 pages is too many pages. It feels like it was written by a 14-year-old teenager into fantasy, Walt Disney, and magic. There is nothing scientific about this. At one point, it suggests that you must imagine shedding your childhood pain to one of the 4 elements: water, earth, wind, or fire. Let me quote him so you see how childish this is. On page 99, IFS has discovered that it is helpful to release a burden to one of the basic elements in nature: water, earth, wind. This signifies that the burden won't come back because it has been carried away by something elemental. Does that sound serious? Does that sound scientific? IFS has discovered where? In a science laboratory? I don't think so. The book relies on examples that are very childish, that only someone driven by fantasy would believe. It is hard to believe that after talking to a part of you that acts out, such as getting angry, that suddenly an image of you being 6 years old appears, and then magically an image of you being a baby in the cradle appears, and you see all this so clearly. This step just sounds too unrealistic, too much fantasy. It looks like these images from childhood or from being a baby in the cradle are actually created by these people that participate in IFS, and they're susceptible to fantasy. Most likely the author and his clients create these fantasy child images. I'm sure 40 years ago you were not walking as a baby with a selfie stick seeing yourself. Right? We usually don't see ourselves, especially back in the old days when there were no selfie cameras, right? So these people are creating these images with their fantasy and not recovering anything. Science would probably say that those memories are most likely lost because they were pre-verbal. You become verbal, you have narratives apart from, let's say, age 7, 8, But before that, it's pre-verbal, so it's very difficult that you're going to find these explanations with images and all that, like this book suggests. Also, this book only has about, I think, 2 examples or 3 examples, and they're not very helpful even for the IFS process. They don't really help you identify too many protectors. And then there's this step when you go when it goes from talking with the protective parts, talking to the parts that are acting out, and then going from there to suddenly, according to this book, after you have won the trust of those protector parts, the parts that act out and all that, then suddenly they show you an image of you being a child, being mistreated as a child. It's hard to believe. There is no step in between that it explains. There's no step in between that says, okay, well, once you've gained you've recognized your acting out parts, then you have to do this step, and then you have to do this other step, and then maybe you're going to start seeing some images or something. No, it just suddenly says, oh, I'm seeing, his client says, oh, I'm seeing myself being 6 years old, and I look fragile, and I look like this, and I'm wearing this, and I'm wearing that, and it's just hard to believe. It doesn't happen to me, at least. So I don't recommend this book. It's not practical at all. So it's not the sort of book that would be practical if you want to practice IFS on your own. And it's extremely thick. It repeats things 100 times. The same thing is repeated over and over again. And the examples that it provides are not very powerful. They're very silly. And here's some images from the book. An image from the book, for example. As you see, it's just a little bit too much of fantasy, Lulu, Walt Disney, kind of like. A serious person is not going to go imagining a magician with this sort of hat and that sort of thing, So I don't recommend buying this book, or worse than that is spending your days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, going through 400 pages of this book.